Welcome to Evolutionary Underground episode 39. This is going to be a really fun one. Today we're going to talk about getting into bodybuilding, how to, compliments of Geneza Pharma. So in this one, look, Mobster and I, we're going to talk about how we first got into the bodybuilding world, because everyone has a fascinating story with that. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about training, diet, PED, and lifestyle importance, and kind of dig into that topic. We're going to talk about the importance of online when it comes to bodybuilding, being on the
Now, yeah,
forums, repping,
yeah,
social media important, all
yeah,
that stuff. And Mobster's going to give his perspective, his boomer perspective on it,
yeah, yeah.
being anti-social media. And I'm actually anti-social media more than
I'm
him.
not, but I do understand how it works. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then we're going to talk about, look, we're going to talk about beginner cycles using Geneza Pharma, because if you want to get
yeah.
into bodybuilding, obviously the guy that you're next to or the girls you're next to are going to be using PEDs.
Yes.
We're filming this podcast during the Olympics, and the Olympics, you got to do what you got to do. You want to win the gold, you got to do what you got to do. So we're gonna get into beginner cycles with Geneza Farmer. So let's first get into how we got into bodybuilding a little bit. And I'll share a quick story from me, Mobster.
Yeah.
Growing up as the skinny, fast kid on the playground, I couldn't even do a pull up. I remember in like third or fourth grade in PE, we had to do pull-ups, and these other kids were able to do like 5-6 pull-ups, even 7-8 pull-ups. They had been into sports and stuff like that. Unfortunately for me, growing up a poor kid, my parents, I was a latchkey kid. My parents could not afford to put me into sports. So for me, the only sports I played was in my backyard. I had a big backyard, and I, used to go in the backyard and kick the soccer ball around and play football and stuff. And that's how I played sports. And then in PE, we get like 30 minutes for PE. So, and I had so much energy growing up, and it would drive me crazy if we didn't go and do something, for recess. I would go crazy. I had to do it. It was like, it's what helped me balance myself. So as an adult, same thing. If I don't exercise, I'll go crazy. I got to get that baby batter out somehow. So I use bodybuilding for me, getting into bodybuilding at around 14, 15 years old. It was my dad had some old weights in the garage, like really back in the garage, in the corner, and it was covered in spider webs because no one had used it in years and just been sitting there. And I decided one day, I don't know what came over me, man. I don't know. I just decided to pick a weight up, and I started doing curls, and like literally, like I would do curls every day. I had no idea what I was doing. And then like a week later, I went and flexed, and I could see, for the first time, I could see some muscle. And I was like, wow, this shit works. So what I would do is I get on my bike and I ride my bicycle a mile to the library. It was about a mile and a half to the library in town. And I'd go in there and I would look on the bibliography, and I would look up weightlifting, bodybuilding, all this shit, because I want to learn about it. And you could only check out 2 books at a time. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that easy back then. If you wanted to acquire knowledge, it wasn't as easy as it is today. Today, it's easy as fuck to get knowledge.
Oh,
There's too
trust
much
me,
knowledge. There's
so
too
easy.
much.
Yeah.
Back then, you could only do 2 books. I check out 2 books, and then I carry them home because I couldn't even afford a book bag in those days. So I'd carry them home with one arm, and then I'd use my other arm to balance, the bicycle, the handlebars on the way home. And I'd read them. And then the next day I'd I'd ride my bicycle back to the library and check out 2 more books and take them home and read them and take them back. So I acquired my knowledge through that. I had a lot of knowledge as a teenager because I read every single book that was in the library on weight training, on bodybuilding, on nutrition, on all this shit. So I was able to apply that, and I had a good weight training program in my high school. So I went out for weight training, and my coach at the time, he saw a lot of potential on me. So he took me under his wing, and he really taught me the basics when it came to compound lifting, Olympic style lifting, clean and jerks, bench press, all that stuff. So I just started hitting the gym, in the entire summer. while other kids were doing whatever,
Yeah.
drinking, doing drugs, smoking pot, whatever, all summer, I was in the weight room every fucking day, 6:30 in the morning. A group of us, mostly football players, but some of us were just wrestlers or weight trainers or just guys who just like lifting weights. We'd be in the gym. They'd open up the gym in the morning during the summer, and the coach would be there, and we'd go in there and we would weight train. I'd go in there, weight train for an hour, hour and a half. That was my thing. And then I'd go to work, and that really helped me. So really putting in the hours in the gym from a young
Yes.
age built up a lot of
Yes.
body and muscle memory. And then from then, look, I did a lot of stuff throughout my 20s. I got into bodybuilding. I did competitive powerlifting. I got into endurance training, stuff like that. But really, in the end, the forums were a place where I used to be into sports forums, Mobster,
Yeah.
especially in my teens and 20s. And I dealt with the bullshit on sports forums. Everyone has their own fucking opinion. So then I got into the bodybuilding forums. It was the same thing. These guys, these old school gurus, had their opinions, and if you disagreed with them, they would bash you and they put you down, even though they didn't know shit. And it was the same thing in the sports forum. So I was used to that shit. So I was
Let me
able
ask
to
you.
kind of,
Let me ask you a question, Steve. I think there's two things, right? One is, why do you think you stuck with it for such a long time? Because some of what you're
yeah.
talking about
Well, I
echoes
think
mine. But
just the
why did
first
you
week,
stick with it?
so lucky for me, I got results that first week.
Yes.
I trained with a guy that entire summer, my junior to senior year. I trained with a guy. We'd go and work out at the local gym in town. And this was before I started working out in my school weight room, but it wasn't junior. It was like my between my sophomore and junior year. And he had just shit genetics. He could not improve. He could not get stronger. He could not build muscle. And later on, I found out he had gotten cancer at a really young age. So really, he was just fucked genetically. Maybe he was exposed to a lot of chemicals growing up. He came from East Europe near Chernobyl. I think it had something to do with it. But I was able to get results, buddy. And when you start getting results at something, that's when you stick with it, and you start being successful at it. And then number two, the other reason is I'm a competitor. I want to win at everything. I
Yeah.
play chess online, and I'm not a good chess player at all, but I go on there and I
Oh,
play against other people all around the world. I've played against people from 65 different countries, right? It's a little
yeah. Yeah.
hobby of
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
And when I lose at chess, I get pissed and I go back and
Yeah.
there's a way to go back.
I'm more like that now. I think the other thing I
Yeah.
want to ask you, Steve, because you and I talked about this, both of us have had this, but I'll ask you for your one. And that is that we've both been lucky at times, including the person you mentioned already, that there've been one or two people that have influenced us. I think you talked about in powerlifting before. You said something to the effect of, there was a powerlifter at the gym and he showed me how, and I've been lucky. And I think some of that encouragement and teaching and someone who's serious at their shit has influenced you a little bit and made you into a better athlete because of their influence.
Yeah.
So talk about that
Yeah,
peer,
it's
that's something someone teaching you.
yeah, and I had a really good weight training coach. He was actually a football coach, and he was really, really he himself was like squatting 500-600 pounds. So he was
Nice.
showing us how it was done. And that inspired me in more ways. One, because I ended up about 10 years later, 10, 12 years later, myself becoming a weightlifting coach at the
Yeah.
high school level, as you guys know, teacher, and also a judge for high school weightlifting, all as a volunteer, by the way. And
Yeah.
I enjoy
Because you
doing
wanted
that.
to pass that knowledge on like we do now.
I was lucky enough because one of the guys I befriended in the gym, one of those big strong dudes, similar to you,
Yeah.
Mobster, his
Yeah.
daughter actually worked as a teacher in a high school. So I befriended him, and he kind of got me into these volunteer programs where can become a teacher, become a volunteer judge and volunteer coach. And people don't realize that these coaches in high school all across America, I don't know if it's the same way in Britain, but a lot of them are just volunteers. And we take time out of our lives to do this, to give back to our community. And it's important. If everyone did that, we'd live in a much better world, of
Yeah. Yeah.
course.
And this is a thing I think that, again, if you're, because of the topic, starting out in bodybuilding, starting out in training, but also I'll be a little bit looser and say training, but we will focus on bodybuilding at times in this podcast. Having good influences, having someone who encourages you is what keeps you in the game. Because a lot of young lads, and I'll generalize and say, population-wise, percentage-wise, I've looked at these numbers before. The number of people that stick, it doesn't just have to be bodybuilding, it can be any sport. If you're not good at it straight away, especially when you're young, you go into something else. And eventually you find something you're good at. So for our listeners, it's going to be bodybuilding. It's going to be lifting weights. That's why they're listening to this show. So Steve and I were both super lucky to have at times people that were able to give us great advice, and that encouraged us to stay with it. As Steve said, we found that we had something about the sport, whether it was a split bicep when I was super lean and younger, whether it was learning that I was really good at the grip stuff around after I'd done age 15 to 2000, so 20 something years, Steve, before I realized I was really good at one particular thing, and so on and so forth. And then obviously to the crazy levels of strength of some of the stuff I do now. I remember very similar to Steve in that I was lifting in my school lunch breaks. I was of the age, Steve, I think my balls dropped. And from 14, I was kind of mediocre to say the least. I don't think I was anything special at sports whatsoever. Average would be probably something to aspire to. And I do remember preschool summer holidays, because my birthday's in the summer holidays, running with the fat kids. And I wasn't fat, but I was running with the fat kids, the unfit kids at the back. I just wasn't that inspired. I didn't really care. I wasn't trying to push myself and so on. And then my balls dropped. Puberty hit me over the school summer holidays, 15 years of age. Come back to school, and within probably 2 to 3 months, I started running on the school runs with the front group. And in fact, so much so that the front group, which were all kids that were within the years of leaving school, he would send us from the sports teachers would send us from a 2 or 3 mile run, which was the norm, off onto a 10K, which is like 6, 7 mile run. So I suddenly got really, really good at sports. And then I started training with the strongest kid in school and another kid that wanted to join the territorial army, which is like the National Guards. So it's sort of part weekend kind of thing, whatever. And I was training with those two. And I should have been eating. I should have been having my school dinner. I shouldn't have been training. I shouldn't have been going without a meal. I should have been having a meal. But for whatever reason, certain things come over that time. I got lucky with a couple of influences, we said. And I think the thing that's kept us going for all this period of time is that we like sharing information. We enjoy what we do. We get rewarded for what we do, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of the way that we got started. Now, something Steve touched upon, and I want to touch on this now, Steve, is that he went to the library and he read and read and read. I think Dorian Yates said the same thing. He literally was told he should be training, did a little bit of training when he was in prison or Borst or whatever the hell it was that he did. He's mentioned in many biographies and documentaries and so on. And he said once he decided he was going to lift, he didn't lift. He went to the library, he brought books, he brought magazines, and he literally sat down and studied them. So one of the things that Steve said is that we have almost too much information. There's kind of a surfeit. You have, again, and I've said this on other shows, more information, more access to PEDs than you've ever had at any point in history. So I was the same as Steve, 2 books, 3 books from the library, read them voraciously. I'm in that position now, Steve, as you know, that I collect them. And why buy them new when I could get them secondhand? It's that kind of vibe. But equally, I think if I was coming to the sport, I might struggle a little bit because I'd probably checking out YouTube videos. I'd probably look at Instagram. And in some ways, it might be a little bit overwhelming. So, first piece of advice for anyone, and it doesn't have to be like Steve and I, teenage, although I do know a lot of people that are serious about the shit started about the same age as Steve and I did, around 15 years of age. It could be any age. You could be retired and coming into bodybuilding. You could be in your 30s, at your peak physical, but you're getting a bit out of shape, so you decide to go to the gym and you get into bodybuilding. Call it weight training, call it whatever. You need good, solid sources of information. And categorized, I mentioned this earlier on. Number one would obviously be training. And a couple of books to recommend. One would probably be Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. You can get loads of those super cheap secondhand. It's about 600 pages, Steve, probably around when you and I came into the sport or just after. And it's got, ignoring all the whole blowing smoke up Arnold's ass, it's literally better to read, looking at the photographs and having a description. And then if you need to go onto YouTube and find someone who's not talking shit and just see how they squat, see how they do the exercise that you've looked up. So there's a couple of solid references that way. And once you find someone, and they don't have to be a giant physically, they don't have to be a bodybuilding professional, whatever else, but they must know what they're talking about. They must be able to demonstrate the exercise well. They do not need to squat 600 pounds or curl 200 pounds or whatever, but they must be able to explain why this exercise affects this muscle and so on and so forth. That's number one in terms of the training. I also talk about, and I said this briefly to Steve in the pre-show, I would actually now probably pay someone just briefly to show me half a dozen exercises. Get a PT for 1 hour, 2 hours. It's worth the money, $50, $100, whatever. And have someone who knows what they're talking about again, whether it's powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever, to show you how to do those exercises properly. Because I think sometimes with information and what our buddies do, and especially if we're young and we go to the gym with our pals, we can fuck shit up, Steve. It's not the world's most complicated thing to do, but sometimes having someone who shows this is how to grip the bar, this is how to put it on your shoulders, this is how to do this is how to do that. Make sure you don't get your fingers stuck in the stack on a machine, that kind of stuff. And it's almost worth, you don't have to pay them on a regular, you don't have to have them there with you every day of the month, whatever, that you hit the gym, but just someone who knows what they're doing, pay them, get good solid advice. The same thing applies to nutrition. Talk about why you think having good knowledge on nutrition will help a person beginning bodybuilding, Steve.
Yeah, and look, nutrition is very important in bodybuilding. And I'll tell you about me, someone who suffers from IBS. My culture, the Mediterranean culture, a lot of us have IBS. A lot of people who are descendants of, the Middle East, who are friends of yours, Jewish people, are prone, Italian people, just the entire Mediterranean region of, Crohn's disease and colitis and the inflammation of the gut. And what it does is actually forces you to really study nutrition and be aware of what goes into your body. So it's almost like a blessing for me, Mobster. Growing up, I was fed, a lot of foods that were inflammatory, and I'd end up with stomach issues. So if you have stomach issues, and you know what I mean, those of you who've weight trained, and if you're going to try to get into weight training or powerlifting or bodybuilding, and you eat the wrong thing, all right, and then you go try to work out, you're not going to have a good workout, and there's a commercial for some pizza or some fast food joint or something. They joke about that, where the person eats the food and then they go and try to play basketball, and all their teammates are like, come on, hurry up, you're playing too slow, whatever. Well, it's because when you eat crap food, you're going to have crap performance. So we see people post on the forums sometimes. I've seen this so many times where people say, well, I had a big meal, and then I went to do squats and I got nauseous and I had to go run to the bathroom and throw up. Well, that's not correct. You shouldn't be having a big meal before a big squat day. When you have a big meal, your body's under stress, having to digest that big meal. Then you go and squat, which puts your body under more stress. So what is the first thing your body wants to do? It wants to evacuate. So it's going to evacuate the most optimal way, which is going to be for forcing you to throw up, right? Because it wants to get rid of the food, so it has less work to do. So now you're dehydrated, and now you're going to have to go home because you're not going to be able to weight train at all. So it's very important. Nutrition is important. The number one reason nutrition is important is so you feel good, so you're able to optimally train. And we see this all the time. Look at Tom Brady, for example. He was able to always have his nutrition on point because of his knowledge, because of his coaching, because he had a staff, he had a chef to cook for him, and he was able to always be optimal for the games, while his teammates were having to run to the bathroom during halftime to have diarrhea because they ate the wrong thing before the game, or they didn't hydrate properly. So all this is important for that reason. So let me tell you something. If you're eating fast food and then you're going to go to do a weight training session, you're only hurting yourself. Very important. Pre-meals, pre-weight training meals are so crucial to do it the right way. So I prefer to train fasted 95% of the time. The only time I won't train fasted is if I'm powerlifting, if I'm going really, really heavy, because you want to fill up those glycogen stores. In that example, what I would recommend those of you who especially who are new to this, or even if you're experienced, to have something light, a couple lightly cooked eggs, okay, good quality lightly cooked eggs that are cooked in the correct oils. I'd use unrefined cold processed coconut oil. Don't use those spray oils. Don't use refined oils or seed oils, because those will backfire on you. You're going to feel like shit, right? So lightly cooked eggs, and then maybe a piece of fruit. That's it. And then that something like that an hour or two before your weight training would be perfectly fine. If you eat the wrong thing, that's going to cause you to bloat, or that causes you to be nauseous or anything. It's not going to end well. So nutrition is so fucking important. When it comes to bodybuilding, nutrition is important. You're not going to grow if you're not eating muscle building foods. You can come on the forums, come on our forums, evolution.org, and our family of forums, and see all the
Yep.
logs and
Yep.
look at how these guys are eating who are having success, and look at
Yes.
the muscle building foods they're consuming. Look at the way they prep their food.
Yes.
And that's the key. That's the key. That's one of the keys to how to get into bodybuilding, is learning nutrition and learning how to prep your food. Very, very crucial.
Yeah.
Mobster?
Yeah. I think it's by Nancy Clark. I might be wrong, which is a very old book now, probably 30 years old, and it's called Sports Nutrition. And the idea is that you must, without becoming overly obsessive and without arguing about the minutiae of certain foods in a particular way, understand how athletes of all kinds, including bodybuilders, benefit by the idea that Steve's encouraged you to think about, and that is the importance of good nutrition. Think of it thus, and I've used this analogy on other podcasts before. You don't buy a high-end, expensive Italian sports car and put low-grade oil and low-grade fuel into that car. You do not spend $200,000, $300,000, 150,000, 200,000 pounds and put the shit low octane stuff in there, the stuff that they sell in Walmart for oils and whatever else. No, you go to a specialist place, you put the good stuff in there, and that's what makes that car perform incredibly well. The same thing, without becoming obsessive, applies to you. And I don't care if you're a beginner or not, you know that it's not going to be Mackie D's or Burger King or whatever else. It's going to be, and it's a lot easier again than it used to be, Steve. It's going to be meal prep, whether you meal prep yourself or whether you use a meal prep company. You don't have to become that guy with the Tupperware tub, walking around 24/7, going to see a film, the movie, go to the cinema, the movie driving or whatever else with your girlfriend, your partner, or whoever, and you're the one that's having, chicken and rice all the goddamn time. But equally, it's not if it fits your macros. And trust me on this, it will at some point, with that becoming overly obsessive, you will start to realize, and you will learn to understand, and we're teaching you how not to have to learn that lesson, that there's been good workouts when your nutrition's been on point, and there's been bad workouts when your nutrition is not. The same thing applies to hydration. Don't become dehydrated. You don't have to be crazy on the pre-workouts and whatever else. First, learn how to get what you can out of food. Yes, we understand, especially if you're younger, that can be difficult paying for it. Meal prep companies can't be cheap. They can be, but there's deals to be done and so on and so forth. But again, learn to cook yourself and you'll save yourself tons. Meal prep loads of stuff in advance, buy in bulk, go to a butcher or a shop that specializes and do a deal with them and so on. I mean, the next part, and we will touch upon this in greater detail, of course, later on in the show, is that at some point, especially if you've done it for more than a few months, you might consider competing. You might consider taking the next step. And that next step might well include, and that's, of course, part of the reason why we do these shows, both supplements, which we'll touch upon, and obviously PEDs. I'll start with supplements, Stephen, and we're expanding PEDs. So it can be, and Steve and I know how this is, especially when you're beginning, kind of overwhelming. If you walk into a Mar and Pa supplement store, health shop, even the health food section, supplement section of some of the bigger supermarkets, what the fuck is this shit? Everything's colorful, everything's the world's most powerful, and so on and so forth. And it can be kind of overwhelming. So you go, right, what are the basics? What do I need to do? And go back to that nutrition again. Make sure, for example, if you do decide to get into it seriously, same as you will with PDs, what supplements work? What's effective? What's the right dose? Is this product all bells and whistles and making lots of claims, but doesn't actually have an effective dose? Is there a study to back it up? Now, other people do that work for you. So there are ways, for example, examine.com is a great site for that kind of thing. We obviously can give you great advice on that stuff on the forums, especially about specifics. For example, Steve, and this is a really basic one, protein powder. Steve's not big on it. I don't go crazy. I used to have a lot more back in the day than I do now, and I'm still a big, strong motherfucker, so I don't need loads. But I've never been big on the flavored. And one of the things that Steve and I talk about on some of these shows, just as a piece of advice that beginners should know, is you don't need tons of flavoring, tons of sweeteners, tons of fillers, everything added to it, and so on and so forth. Sometimes real basic stuff works. When we talk about more advanced supplements, and we've covered this on other shows that we do as part of the Evo family, we talk about the specific ingredients and why the ingredients are dosed the way that they're dosed, and so on and so forth. We talk about how they have to come from this place, etc. And this is the kind of information you need to know. It's not like going to school. It's not like going to university. And yes, it can sometimes feel a little bit complicated and overwhelming, which is why you can come onto the forums and ask for advice. So talk about, again, Steve, in this one, and we will go into PEDs momentarily, the importance of understanding and where to get information on, etc., of supplements once you become serious.
Yeah, and that's, I wish I had an answer for that, buddy, but unfortunately, the supplement industry, look, it's a very shady industry, and 95% of supplements out there are garbage. So, and you're either going to be overpaying for something that's inferior, or you're going to be buying something that's completely just over marketed. So, look, unfortunately, the supplement industry, they're a huge industry, the $1 trillion industry. They sponsor a lot of these bodybuilders out there. So the
Yeah,
thing is, obviously, you mentioned protein powder. I'm not a fan of it. It's fake
yeah,
food. And the thing is, every bodybuilder, they have their own brand of whey protein. Why? Because it's cheap to produce. There's a high margin on it, and also because it's legal. And and that's the bottom line. So they're going to push things like that to the public, and that's one of the things you have to be aware of. So a big issue with protein powder is that it's dairy. It's a dairy product,
yes,
and
yeah,
dairy is difficult to digest. So again, we go back to what I said earlier. If you're consuming something that's difficult to digest before your workout, what do you think is going to happen when you try to work out? So you have to find the supplements that work for you and that are beneficial. Another one that I'm not a fan of as well is branched chain amino acids.
yeah.
Just not necessary, especially for those of us who live in North America or Britain. You're getting plenty already by supplementing it. You're just wasting your money. So really, at the end of the day, when it comes to supplementation, I'm a big fan of herbals. Look into herbals, look into support supplements when you're
Yeah.
using steroids, things like Tutka, things like Fedosia. These are
A good
actual,
joint product, Steve. A
yeah,
good
joint
fish oil.
problems. Yes.
Yeah,
You need to stack them. Just don't use them by themselves. You need to stack them together. So you can come on our forums and check out some of the supplements we recommend. Now when it comes to PDs, we're going to get into PD topic in a minute, but it's very important when it comes to bodybuilding at some point down the line. And look, at the end of the day, it's your body, your choice. I'm a big believer in that. And you have to make a decision when you're going to do it. I talk to younger guys. I'll tell you something. When I was a weightlifting coach, Mobster, I didn't see steroid use. Either the kids were really good at hiding it, or I think it's overblown when it comes to. But then again, I did teach at a more poor part of the country. I wasn't teaching at a rich. If you go to a rich part of America, the suburb, the rich suburbs, you're going to see steroid use. You're going to see recreational drug use like heroin and lots of different things. And because the kids have money, the kids literally never worked a day in their life, and they have bank accounts bigger than most adults, and they're driving cars fancier than most adults.
I've
And
seen it.
that's the way it is. So
Oh, I only got a Mercedes.
exactly. And that's
I've
what
seen those
happens. The
videos.
parents will
Yeah,
give them
yeah,
like a $50,000 car, and the parents will buy $100,000 car. But anyway, my point is, it is part of it. So when you decide to use PDs is up to you, but at some point you're going to need to. If you want to excel at this, So you're going to want to check out Geneza Pharma at some point, whether it be 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, and you're going to want to use them. So they're necessary. PEDs are going to be necessary to push yourself to the next level. And I'm going to explain why. I was watching last night a compilation of the sprinting from the Olympics, and it was the 100-meter sprint, which is the most fun Olympic summer sport I enjoy watching myself.
Yeah. Muscular guys going like the
Yeah.
clappers. Yeah.
So I was watching it, and in 1988, it was the Carl Lewis was supposed to win. He was he won in '84. He was supposed to win, and then Ben Johnson ended up winning, and it was a big shock. And I was watching it, and I was so blown away by these guys, their physiques and everything. And Ben Johnson, we know he ended up using he got busted for steroids, but you know the thing is about it, if the guy next to you is using steroids and you're not using steroids, you're automatically at a disadvantage. That's the problem. So when you want to get into bodybuilding, if you want to compete, if you want to have the best pictures for your Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you've got to use them at some point, unfortunately. That's just how it is. But we
So
want to wait. We want to wait till we build a proper base, and we want to
yeah.
wait till we build. I didn't start using steroids, full disclosure, till I was about 28, 29. And I started weight training at about 14. So do the math. That was 14, 15 years. Same thing with Mobster. Mobster waited, I think, even
Oh, a
longer.
long time, 22
Yeah.
years. I went until I was nearly 30.
Yeah.
I was 37.
So at the end of the
We
day,
talk about,
go ahead.
sorry, before we talk about specific steroids that we might get into beginners, Steve just mentioned something else. And we want to touch on this point now, Steve. In this day and age, and it certainly didn't exist when I came into the sport, and I think Steve as well, social media, repping, being on the forums, is become a thing. And there's Steve mentioned at the beginning the boomer thing. So not every person that's going to be listening to this show or take up training or begins bodybuilding needs an Instagram account, and they don't need 10,000 followers, because the reality is it's only going to be the same small percentage that are going to do well. There's a lot more people training. That's just a matter of fact. There's a lot more people existing on the planet. There's a lot bigger percentage of people of that number training as ever trained before. The gyms are, my local gym, Steve, is as busy as it's ever been, especially post-COVID. So they're doing incredibly well. They've had to limit the membership at times. They're full-blown members because the numbers have got so high. If I have not gone in the afternoon, I'm told it's a fucking zoo, and it was a kind of zoo before. It's even worse there. So many youngsters training. And of course, that the social media influence has played a big part of that. That's encouraging them to train because they've seen physiques of people like themselves online, but equally of social media being a thing that they think they need to get on. So here's the thing. And listen, we're doing this show, and I have probably had some luck in that area, Steve, over the last, probably ever since I started to make a name for myself in the sport as a grip person, as an athlete that competed and was winning grip competitions. And I had my magazine, and I've done other things, and I've rep for companies and have had supplements sent to me on a monthly basis. So I've been there, and my social media is actually kind of tiny in that regards. And yet, because I've done the other stuff, it's kind of influential. So here's the thing, right? It can inspire you. It can motivate you. It can make you want to stay in good condition when you be tempted maybe to get out of shape by having social media. So you need almost to stay in shape. Equally, it can be overwhelming. There's a certain degree of pressure there. And again, not every single one of you is going to rep for a company. That's physically impossible. Not every single one of you is going to win a powerlifting, a strongman, or a bodybuilding competition. Again, that's impossible. One of the things that I've done, and I've actually told this story before, we had a person training here, young guy, 18, during COVID, and wanted to do the boardwalk type stuff, Steve, with the beach shorts. And another of these buddies was very similar, was slightly older. And in fact, he's still got that kind of physique. But the younger fella was like, oh, I think I'm going to do this whole Instagram physique type thing. And I said, mate, you need to go off and get something that actually puts money in the bank on a regular basis first, which we got him into. And ironically, Steve, it was so successful, that's the thing he's ended up concentrating on. And I said, look, 4 days a week doing this thing, and a couple of days a week doing the Instagram stuff, but carry on training, keeping that going. That's good. You're here, you're working out with us, we're giving you advice. And I actually ended up getting him on a civil engineering railway type thing down here with one of the other guys there. And he ironically went off and straight away was earning a couple of $1,000 a week. And because he's young, he could carry on doing that. And the reality of the situation was that it was as good as his physique may well have been, it wasn't a guarantee to a successful lifestyle. That said, as I say, you'll be influencing other people, you're putting stuff out there, repping on forums, forum work itself. The social media stuff is important and it will become more important. And I'll let Steve expand on this a little bit as well. If you actually do become successful, use the example that Steve did earlier on. On the forums, we have lots of people, myself and Steve for that matter, right now running logs. And these are incredibly attractive to other members. They will come on, they will be inspired. And one of the things Steve and I have noticed is those that put the most information, the best pictures, and I mean just properly taken photographs, pictures of their food. The food photographs are kind of food porn, but they're also holding the person, the member, accountable. So they have to eat clean because the guys want to see the food that they're posting. And it can't be burgers and fries. It has to be a proper meal that's healthy, high protein, delicious. It doesn't just have to look good, it's got to be good. And ironically, being held accountable in that way, putting down the truth about what they're doing, including the PEDs, and us going, okay, you need to lower that a little bit. You need to do a bit more training in the gym. This is important to you. Da, 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 da. Boom, boom, boom. What happens, Steve? 99% of those people that do that and listen to us are successful. They will have the greatest transformations. So talk about what you think in terms of the importance of social media, repping and being on the forums for the young or even some older person who's just joining the game but wants to be successful, Steve.
The reason I like the forums a lot better is number one, the forums are anonymous. You don't have to have friends and family checking out your Facebook or your Instagram up your ass. You can talk freely about your steroid use. It's a positive environment. Social media is negative. You know, all these social media platforms across the board, it's all negative. Everyone's jealous of each other. There's too much negativity. Our forums are a positive place where we can share ideas, help each other, and help guide each other. And we have a great team on the forums that is in there day in and day out to support you. So I'm a big fan of coming on our forums, evolutionary.org, and starting up your own log. And that's the best way that you're going to excel. We'll help you with your meals. We'll help you with your training. We'll help you with your steroid cycles. And that's going to help you much better than being on social media, which is a very, very negative and depressing place. And we've actually seen studies on this, Mobster, that people who spend time on social media are more depressed, are more negative, are less successful. They're more prone to suicide and all this other stuff. So why be a part of that environment where you can just come on the forum? So the forums are 100% better. And a lot of people are realizing that. And we've actually done a great job on the forums of promoting people doing logs for that reason. And it's really worked out beautifully. Logs, look, Mobster touched on it, but your logs hold you accountable. Mobster has a log, I have a log. And look, for me, like I said the example on a podcast a few weeks ago. There was a day that happened to me where I got in my car and I was like, man, I just don't feel like going to the gym today. I just
Yeah.
didn't feel like
Yeah.
it. But you know what? I said, you know what? Fuck, I have a log. I'm accountable to so many people. I have to set an example for the other people on the forum. So make me fucking go. Let me fucking grab my balls, even though I don't feel like going. I had a bad
Yeah.
day at work, and let me
Yeah.
go anyway. So I went and I had a fucking amazing workout. Sometimes when you don't feel like going are the days you have the best fucking workouts. And that's what it's all about. And listen, without doing a log, I've done logs, plenty of logs in my time, right? And when I stop doing my log, it's almost like my motivation drops. So it's like a log is so fucking important. I don't care if you're a farmer, you're an engineer, you're a doctor, whatever. It's always important to log your days and log what you're doing so you can learn from it and you have a record you can go back to and see through trial and error what worked and what did it. And like I said, it's completely anonymous on the forum. You can block out your face, you can block out your tattoos, whatever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stay anonymous. And people love that about the forums. You don't have to worry about friends and family being all jealous of you because they are going to get jealous of you. And it really, that's just the way human beings are, buddy. It's a negative trait. Jealousy is a negative trait. So you don't have to worry about it on the forums. We're all positive and we all support you. And just come on and be honest. If you ate McDonald's or Burger King, as Monster said earlier, then you just say it. You know, we're not going to jump down your throat. We're not going to tell you to go fuck yourself like these other forums. If you do something like
I
that,
might give you
that's
shit, but I won't. I
fine.
won't. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes, we'll give you
yeah.
some
Get back on the
shit.
grind,
We'll
motherfucker.
give you a kick in the
Get,
ass, but we're not going to tell you
yeah,
to go
get back
fuck
on the
yourself.
grind. I
Exactly.
don't want to hear excuses. We get this, right? I mean, we got a couple of older members, people of a certain age, people of a certain disposition, and sometimes are hard on themselves. Oh, I can't do this month because this is happening. I'm like, no, you can. You can do it. You already made a decision that you're not going to do it because this happened. No, 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 no. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that you made it happen anyway. Like Steve said, time days at work. Been there. We got guys on the phone that are truck drivers, all different kinds of life, educated, uneducated, redneck hillbillies on our forum. You know who I mean. And we got people that are incredibly highly educated. And sometimes, including me and Steve, we need to kick up the ass. We get back on the straight and narrow, motherfucker, because we want to see you succeed, because we want to see you transform. The problem sometimes with social media and outside influences, Steve, is people do not. And what do I mean by that? If they are out of shape and they're not taking the steps to get into shape, you taking the steps can be a reminder that they're lazy ass motherfuckers. And you are listening to this show because you are taking those steps. You are beginning bodybuilding. You are beginning training, and you want to be successful. And we want you to be successful. Geneza wants you to be successful. They don't want people taking their products to fail. They want people taking their products to succeed. So the forums, the way that we're describing this stuff is a way that makes you successful, or certainly more successful. As an example, and I'll just use what Steve talked about. I've got an amazing home gym, and I can train probably better, arguably, than most people do strength training in my home gym. It's not only A, because it's a better home gym than most people's home gyms, and B, because that's the way that I'm built. However, if you follow my log, you'll know that recently, Steve, I've been going to the local gym almost every fucking day that I train. Certainly 3 out of the 4 sessions recently have been at the local gym. And I even said this to another freak at the gym yesterday. And I've told him this before. Sometimes I will come here to the gym, the same as on the forums, same as what we're just talking about, to hold myself accountable, to imagine that I'm being fucking watched, even if I'm not, because then I have to do those things that I set out for myself. I have to strive. I will have lazy days. I would have had a session in the gym at my home that was exactly the same, but I didn't do as many reps. So if I was meant to do 6, I might have only done 4. If it didn't have a log, the same. If I could put down what the fuck I want on a log that no one sees, but when everybody's looking at it, well, you know, if I didn't succeed, there has to be a fucking good reason, and I will say why that I didn't succeed. And I will even admit to sometimes, you know, slacking off. Oh, yesterday was crazy hard. Today was not. I just couldn't put all the things I wanted into it. But in my head, I'm thinking, don't keep that fucking going. You've got to be better than that next time. You've got to ease off on the Monday session so the Tuesday session's a better session, and so on. And all of those things, not just my experience, but Steve's experience, other experts, other people coming in, other people geeing you up, other people, what the fuck, motherfucker, you are the goat of strength on this forum, and so on, keeps you fucking going. So it's super, super important in that particular regard. Like I said, the key takeaway when it comes to the forums and on social media, repping, etc. Repping's another one, Steve, as well. How do you get to rep? Well, without going into too much detail, you get to be seen as worthy. And one of the things I want to touch upon before we move on to the next topic, Steve, is this idea. And I've had this, I've owned a supplement company. I've had people approach me for products and say, oh, if you will send me a free t-shirt, I'll wear the t-shirt down the gym. And you're thinking, mate, that really is not going to make me any money. There is an element of work to this. If I'm a professional bodybuilder and I put up a half-hour video of me training arms pre some big competition, it's really 4 hours work. Larry Wills does a video, whoever, it's 4 hours work. It's an hour filming for a half-hour video that turns into 4 hours of editing to put it up online. And that's how that is. The same thing with repping. You are repping daily. You're repping in the morning before you go to work, before you go to school, you're repping in the afternoon, you're repping on weekends. It's a job of work. Now, if a big company and you're a professional bodybuilder, a professional athlete wants to put it into that particular position, it could be maybe a six-figure contract, $100,000 a year. It probably isn't. And I would also recommend that you have some other sort of second or third string income coming in. But here's a great thing about it, which is a positive, Steve. The positive is you are being rewarded for putting out. You are being rewarded for your passion. You are being rewarded for your training. So long as you understand that there's an element of work to it and that you've got to put into that the same kind of drive and dedication that you do into the gym, that you do at the dinner table, at some point, if you start to make a name for yourself, if you put out great information, great advice, good photographs, if you're out there inspiring people, and especially if you start to win competitions, then you end up in a great position. I've been fortunate with the grip stuff, Steve. I used to get samples of grippers sent to me to try, DVDs and VHS cassettes when they were a thing, supplements to try out, books. I've got books upstairs signed by the authors that were sent for me to review for my magazine. Even now, I will do. People recognize the fact that I've got home gym equipment and will tag me on something on Marketplace. Steve, check this out. Mobster, check this out. That kind of stuff. And well, I've seen this advert for this, this, and this. Would you be interested? So that's useful, and that's because of the reputation. The fact that I even do these podcasts is a story in and of itself, where I was criticizing something I'd seen on to do with a podcast, and instead of the person telling me to go do one, they actually said, "Do you think you could do better?" And I sort of suggested I thought I could. I sent my sort of weightlifting, bodybuilding, call it what you like, CV, and that's how I become on Evo. That's how I started.
I think you're criticizing me.
No, I'll tell you who it was actually.
Oh, okay.
I think I'll tell you who it was because I don't mind this story. I don't really don't mind. Gearhead. He put a post to do with one of the podcasts. I think it was on MD's forum or RX's forum. And I said, this was atrocious. I was being a bit of a bitch. And I said it was horrendously bad. And he DM'd me and said, could you do, instead of saying, fuck off, motherfucker, what the fuck, it's my second language or whatever. No, he was cool as fuck. He said, can you do better? And I said, look, I've had a magazine, I've done this, I've had articles published. God damn, yes, what the fuck? You know, because I need to give a shit one way or the other. And that's how it happened. It got to come on to Evolutionary.
And now you're doing all these podcasts.
Now I'm doing this goddamn show and giving that this kind
every
of
other
advice.
day. You're doing a podcast.
Yeah,
now.
exactly, and doing this advice and doing repping and whatever else. So ultimately, I call myself retired, Steve. I go, hang on, I'm working while I'm retired. Well, what am I doing? What are you doing? We are talking about the shit that we like, that we have a passion for, that we've done for a very long time. And that ultimately is where a beginner can turn something that there's a passion or hobby into something that's a little bit more, pays a bill, that gets them supplements, but at the same time, every single day they're telling people how fucking great they like to train, how great it is to eat healthy, how great it is to use solid supplements at work, and even how to use PDs in a sensible, safe-ish kind of way that is actually kind of valuable to the people that pay attention to it if it's good, solid information, and also it's beneficial to them. There's a feedback loop in here. You might not make a load of money, whatever else. Let's talk about a few cycles using Geneza products, Steve, that would be solid for beginners. Now, when I say beginners, let me preface this. I don't want you training for 3 months and using PEDs. I don't give a fuck if you're 40 odd years of age. I want you to learn how to train. That takes a bit more than 3 months. I want you to learn how to eat. I want you to learn about supplements. So there's a little bit of a apprenticeship at the beginning. You need to get the other stuff right as well. But at the same time, you can start to learn, you can start to pay attention, get good information. So here's, for example, let me give you one really, really simple example. And this is an oral cycle, Steve. So probably myself especially started with Debo. And Geneza do a 10 milligram and a 50 milligram version of Dynabol. Now, real simple, 30 to 50 milligrams a day, 7 days a week. The amount of people that have done that as a straightforward, easy to start with, very simple cycle that feels good, that isn't crazy in terms of dosages, and will blow you the fuck up if you're predisposed for it, especially if you've never done a steroid cycle before. That's probably, certainly of my time, see, Boomer, probably the #1 steroid cycle that anybody's ever done. Give a beginner a simple oral cycle, Steve, that they can start with using Geneza products before we talk about injectables as well.
Yeah, and then Dianabol, look, it's a dummy-proof steroid. You can be like a skinny guy and you can jump on Dianabol and you'll blow up, like Mobster said. But there are side effects with Dianabol. You have to watch out for the estrogen side effects. So you would also want to get some Geneza Pharma Aromacin to possibly use with it, to probably use with it, especially if you use a higher dose. Now, if you wanted to just not worry about the estrogen aspect, you just wanted to start out with something that's not going to cause a lot of androgenic and estrogenic side effects. You could go with either Turinabol or you could go with Anavar. And both of them can be ran anywhere from 20 to 50 milligrams a day. And in both situations with these orals, you go 6 to 8 weeks and you have really good results. Obviously, you want to make sure you run your liver support with them. So those are really, really good options. In
Yeah.
terms of injectables, now, it's not a bad idea to start out with an oral, maybe a 1 or 2 oral cycles just to kind of dip your toes. Keep the
Yes.
cycle short. You can recover quickly. Make sure you're running a PCT. And then down the line, you can introduce injectables. Either you can do an injectable only cycle or you can do an injectable with an oral. So you can use one of each. So the most popular injectable that Geneza Pharma sells, obviously, is going to be testosterone. And the good thing
Yes.
about the Geneza Pharma testosterone is that it's properly dosed. So you're not going to run 500 milligrams of Geneza Pharma testosterone where you're not going to get any effects. Like some guys in the past, they're like, I'm not getting any results on 500 milligrams. Well, it's because your stuff is underdosed. Well, Geneza Pharma is dosed correctly. And also, it's very clean gear and also it's very smooth. So even for someone like me who's very prone to post injection pain, very, very sensitive, my body does not like being pinned with
Yeah.
oils and sharp objects, right? Well, with Geneza Pharma, their Cypionate and then their Enanthate, which are the top two
Yes.
selling injectables that
Yes.
they have, which are the top two selling injectables in the really overall for steroid users. We know this from polling. They're very smooth, so you're not going to have to worry. It's not going to be a pain to inject them. So you could run those 10 to 12 weeks at 500 milligrams a week. Make sure you're
Yes.
running your Romacin or your Arimidex from Geneza Pharma as well, and you'll get really, really good results.
Yeah. I mean, look, Steve, one of the things we talk about, and this is beginner type stuff, especially when it comes to injectables, we've done a show which is well worth listening to on pinning and how to safely inject as best as possible and not get issues, how to deal with post-injection pain and so on and so forth. So have a listen to that, especially if you're beginning to use injectables. We talk about pro cycles, and one of the influences of social media can sometimes be that youngsters, newbies, people coming into the sport for the first time, think you need to do crazy amounts. Look at the oral stuff that we talked about. That's 210 milligrams a week. 50 milligrams would be 350 milligrams a week. It doesn't need to be grams and grams. Look at what Steve just said, and I did exactly the same thing written down, Steve. Both the testinate and the cypionate come in 250 milligrams, 2 jabs a week. 500 milligrams is probably the most basic testosterone cycle of all time. I've got another couple of here, Steve, funny enough. And this is, I'd probably suggest this. One of the things, let me give you a preface this with a bit of advice. When it comes to certain, especially if you're a beginner new to injectable steroids, maybe you've done one cycle previously and it was a test in Amphate or test cypionate like we suggested. You want to try something different. You don't have to. One of the pieces of advice I get, if the last cycle worked, do that cycle again. But if you want to try something different, I always recommend a shorter ester of that, quicker in, quicker out. So if there are any side effect issues, then you haven't got to worry about it for more than a day or two because it's real short time in your system. Once you know that you're okay with it, you can continue in that vein or use a longer ester of the same product, and you should have, fingers crossed, a similar response. Therefore, you can run it longer for longer periods of time. So as an example, Geneza do something called test blend, which is 200 milligrams of test enanthate, 100 milligrams of test cypionate, and 50 milligrams of test propionate. Propionate's a little bit shorter, but the other two esters are relatively long. That comes to 350 milligrams. And I would probably only run that as 1.5 mils a week. That's still 500 milligrams. But if you wanted to, and again, I would rather you done 2 or 3 cycles at this point. You might push it out towards 2 mil a week, Steve, which would take it up to 700 milligrams. And again, that's real basic. It's just testosterone, 3 different esters, nothing complicated. Give the listeners another one before we talk about
Yeah.
Geneza themselves.
So a couple more options. We had a guy, really, it was his first real steroid cycle on the forum. His name was Noah Wicks, and we interviewed him a couple times. I interviewed him myself, and Mobster and I both did a show with
Yeah,
him, a special,
yeah,
and he did
yeah, special, yeah.
primobolan, which was his first real cycle. He had tremendous results, and the best thing of all is the side effects were really low. So you can go that route, or you can go with equipoise and run 200 to 500 milligrams a week for 12 weeks, and that would be a good injectable run as well. So those would be a couple additional options, and you could go with. So let's talk a little bit about Geneza Pharma. We have a few minutes to go on the
Yeah,
podcast.
listen, guys, right? You're new. You're coming into the game. You want to, at some point, like we said already, run a steroid cycle or all injectables. What do you need? You need a company like Geneza that's been around a long ass time. Why is that? You wouldn't, if you just started driving, jump into the first goddamn car at the showroom and that's the car you're going to drive. No, you'd want to know a bit about the car. Is it safe? What's the economy like? And so on. You need to know that the company that you're using, like Geneza, is good to use. Has it had good reviews online? As, not just on the Evo forum, but anywhere that you look. Yes. Has it been around a long ass time? Same thing with a car company. Does the car been a car company just created in the last 6 months? This is the first goddamn car that it's bound to have problems, Steve. Bound to. But when the car company's been around for 100 fucking years, they probably owned out all the kinks. So you want a PED company that's been around a long time, 5, 10, 15 years. Ideally, Steve, somewhere with 10 years plus, 20 years is even better. Geneza has you covered. You want products, and the same, I use the car analogy again. You want reviews, not just by buddies and people that might be referred for the company, but actual products that have been tested. So, for example, with cars, Steve, you have car magazines and literal auto authors who know every single, almost anal detail about this car. They will measure the width, the height, the fucking diameter, the tires, everything. Auto cars kind of like that. So you're same thing again. You want products that have been tested. You want products that have been tried. You want a company that's been around long enough so that they don't have to iron out any kinks. Their cypionate is cypionate. It does exactly what it says on the label. The half-life is exactly what it should be. They haven't fucked up. They've got the oil that the product held in suspension of spot on. When I talk about testing, we say independent testing. Lots of companies start with great intentions and very, very quickly get lazy or greedy. And one of the things that a proper company like Geneza does is they do in-house testing. That's number one. In their own lab, they will take a product off the line, go off and test it, and make sure that the guys that are producing it have got the product. Then, secondly, they will take that product from the line and they will send it to an outside lab so that the people that are testing it in the lab are being shown to have done their job properly. That's production and in-house testing. And finally, what is probably the best is truly independent testing. Customers, listeners like yourself, with a little bit of disposable cash, buying a product and taking it and sending it off for testing themselves. We will see people say this or that about certain particular companies, but the reality is they're nearly always parroting something that they heard from someone else, or they've got some reason for talking shit. If they haven't taken that product, had it tested, and put up the results of that test with a batch number, with a number, a reference that you can check for yourself, then are they talking shit? Almost certainly. Is it something they heard? Almost certainly. The reality of that situation is a lot cheaper now to do these kind of things than it was before. So not super cheap, but it's still way cheaper than it used to be. And that's what we see with companies like Geneza. We know that their products have been done in-house. We know that they can be trusted. We know that they've sent their products off for testing outside, but we know for a fact that members, listeners like you listening to the show right now have taken those products and sent them off for testing and they've come back on point. Talk about that, Steve, before we get into the finish of the show.
Yeah, what you put in your body is so crucial. I think a big mistake that new people do to steroids is they assume, well, if I just Google where to buy steroids online, and the first one that pops up is probably going to be the best option. I mean, it's there, but you have to remember that at the end of the day, quality matters, and the gear that's being sold out there, 95% of it is crap. So you got to make
Yes.
sure that you're using high quality gear. So Geneza Pharma has high quality gear. It's a brand that Mobster and I trust. It's a top 3 brand in the world for a reason. So you can come on the forums, you can find out how to get Geneza Pharma, and you'll be good to go. If this is the first time you use steroids, or if this is the 20th time you use steroids, Geneza
Yes.
Pharma will take care of you. They have everything you need, both on and off cycle. Great source.
We'll point you in the right direction for nutritional advice, for supplement advice, for training advice. If you're new, if Steve said it's your 20th time, you're 10 years into the system, but especially if you're new, if you're a beginner like we're talking about today, we're there ready to rock and roll for you guys. And especially if you get a log up, which is going to help us enormously. Let us know what you thought about the show. Post down in the comments below. Come onto the forums, ask us questions, what you should do as a beginner. We're there ready waiting for you. Please note, we are not doctors and opinions are ours. It is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.